Just like all of you, your favorite roller coaster probably changes as you get to check out newer roller coasters. Some of us continue to have nostalgia to the classics, and others will switch out their favorites on a daily basis. I thought it would be fun to discuss my favorite roller coasters throughout the years, starting with my first quote-unquote major roller coaster and working all the way to my latest number one. Before we get into this video, do me a favor by clicking on that like button, and if you are new to my channel and love roller coasters like me, make sure you subscribe. Our first roller coaster takes us to Dorney Park. My first ever major roller coaster was none other than Thunderhawk. It was 1999 and I finally overcame my fear of getting on a roller coaster. Now, it was the only major roller coaster I rode that year. I kick myself to this day knowing that I passed up the opportunity to ride the defunct Hercules, but anyways, Thunderhawk I thought was the best coaster ever. In my mind, it was fast, fun, and full of exciting pops of airtime. My last ride on this attraction was back in 2021, and it definitely doesn't hold up, but I hear that this coaster is getting some major work done by Dorney Park staff, so hopefully it'll be running better this year. At this time in history, my current coaster count was somewhere between 5 and 10, but all but that one roller coaster were considered kiddie coasters. My next favorite roller coaster came the following year in 2000 at Knoebels. Phoenix was exciting and I loved the first time flipping upside down on Whirlwind, but Twister quickly became my new favorite roller coaster. This ride looked massive, went super fast, and had lots of laterals and airtime, and I couldn't imagine there being another better wooden roller coaster than Twister. Well, this favorite coaster didn't hold that ranking too long because a few short weeks later I made my way over to Six Flags Darien Lake, and that's when I discovered my new fave, Mindy Racer. I know, not Superman Ride of Steel, but Mindy Racer. Now, this coaster is probably ranked near the bottom of my listing now, but for your first time never being on an inverted roller coaster, this ride was pretty crazy. I loved how compact the layout is, the snappy inversions, the feet chopper moments. I thought this ride was great. I did ride Superman that season, but I was still working through some of my coaster fears, and Superman was a little beyond me at that time. 2001, this all changed, and I rewrote Superman, making it my new number one. It held on to this title for 3 years until 2004 when I took on a brand new amusement park, Cedar Point. Before I get ahead of myself, my coaster count between 2000 and 2003 was somewhere around 15 to 20 credits. 2004 is when everything changed. Making it to Cedar Point felt like I became an official coaster enthusiast. I rode every roller coaster in the park and was equally impressed by many, but there's one attraction that stood out amongst the pack, and over everything else. That was Top Thrill Dragster. This massive strata coaster was a life-changing experience. In my mind, and I still somewhat hold to this statement, I don't know how much faster and more extreme we can get. Cedar Point was my first trip of that year, and it was in June of 2004. A couple months later, I convinced my family to do another theme park trip, this time to Hershey Park. Similar to Cedar Point, I enjoyed every roller coaster at the park, but the one that stood out as the best was a no contest. It was Storm Runner. This roller coaster was the whole reason I convinced my family to take the trip. I was instantly obsessed with hydraulic launching roller coasters, and the fact that there was another one only a few hours away, I couldn't pass up the opportunity. Storm Runner did overtake Top Thrill Dragster as my favorite, not because it's crazier or more intense, but because it has the more complete layout that included elements and inversions. At the end of 2004, my coaster count was somewhere around 45 credits. 2005, a new roller coaster caught my fancy, and that would be SheiKra at Busch Gardens, Tampa. Thankfully, I had family down in the Sunshine State, so I was able to visit the park during its opening season. I became a fanatic of this dive coaster, even bought a souvenir hat, which looked really bad on me, but anyways, SheiKra was the bomb. I rode this roller coaster a dozen times during my visit. Now, I would consider dive coasters to be cliche, gimmicky, or whatnot, but SheiKra still has a special place in my coaster riding history. Up until 2006, my coaster count was somewhere around 60 credits. SheiKra held on to my number one slot for 2 years until 2007, when I got to ride the greatest roller coaster of that generation, El Toro, at Six Flags Great Adventure. I was in disbelief after my first ride. How could a roller coaster have so much airtime and be this intense? The crazy amount of ejector airtime was unlike anything else I experienced. Unfortunately, this attraction is starting to lose its luster with poor maintenance. I'm really hoping the park puts the proper care back into this attraction so it can return to its former glory. El Toro held on to my #1 slot for many years, all the way until the summer of 2014. The weekend after Labor Day, I returned to Hershey Park. Skyrush was the new coaster in town, well, by like 2 years, but I never made it to the park before then, so I was eager to return to Hershey Park. So yeah, it took me 2 years, but here I was, standing in line, mesmerized by how fast this cable lift was pulling the train to the top of the first drop. Even before strapping in, I still wasn't ready for how crazy this roller coaster was going to be. After my first ride, I knew that Skyrush was a masterpiece. Those simple airtime hills looked like nothing while standing in line, but after riding the coaster, I realized that looks can be deceiving. Skyrush was providing insane ejector airtime, something that I hadn't experienced since El Toro. It was a tough call, but Skyrush edged out El Toro and became my new #1. My current coaster count at this time was somewhere between 100 and 110 credits. The battle for my favorite roller coaster was an internal struggle between Skyrush and El Toro, but again, this all changed in 2018. Cedar Point announced Steel Vengeance back in 2017, but we knew something was happening all the way back in mid-2016, when the park announced that Mean Streak would close at the end of the summer season. Steel Vengeance opened to mass praise, and it basically became everybody's favorite roller coaster. In terms of airtime, it's still the best that you can get on this planet, but there's actually more to a roller coaster than airtime. Steel Vengeance had a great layout, fun elements, and obnoxious amounts of airtime. At the end of this year, my coaster count sat somewhere around 170 credits. Steel Vengeance held on to the #1 slot for 3 years, beating out other possible contenders like Lightning Rod, Voyage, and Intimidator 305. However, 2021 is when my coaster taste slightly changed when I took my first trip to Carowinds. I realized that I was a B&M fanboy after just one ride on Fury 325, the tallest giga coaster on the planet, or in more technical terms, the tallest roller coaster in the world that features a chain lift. That first drop was crazy. It wasn't the best airtime moment, but with that height and how long that drop lasted, it became an easy top 3 drop in the world. The rest of the layout is all about those high speeds, overbanked turns, and of course, airtime. The treble clef element was something unique, featuring that sideways airtime that, up to this point, I only found on an RMC. My coaster count from 2018 to 2021 had rapidly increased from 170 up to 290 credits. 2022 is where this #1 journey ends. It took me 15 years, but I finally returned to Universal Studios Islands of Adventure. VelociCoaster opened the previous year in 2021, but I missed the opening date by a couple weeks. Kara and I took a special weekend trip in February of 2022 just to check out this alleged amazing roller coaster. After my first ride, I knew that VelociCoaster was special, but it wasn't until my 4th ride that I knew that this coaster would become my new #1 favorite roller coaster. VelociCoaster is the whole package. It has the great theming, excellent layout, 2 launches, inversions, and airtime. That Mosasaurus roll instantly became my favorite inversion. Even the dive loop and Immelman are fantastic elements. Basically every element on this roller coaster was amongst the best of the best. Well, this is where my journey, for now, comes to a close. I have been on more new roller coasters since VelociCoaster, but none was able to top it. As of this video, my coaster count sits at 302. I have more parks in the works for 2023, hopefully heading down to Fun Spot America in Atlanta, Georgia. There's Six Flags Over Georgia, and I'll be returning to Dollywood at some point this year. My biggest plans may involve a return to California or possibly Florida, but only time will tell. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please tell me your favorite coasters down in the comments. Until next time, this is Extreme Thrills.